Dude, have you been enjoying the cherry smoothies?
Dude, I'm enjoying the cherry smoothie so much that I've already killed my frozen cherry bag in my freezer.
Are you serious?
Yeah,
Nice.
guys, I texted Jake like 4 days ago.
Dude, that's legit. I think it's so delicious doing a little protein smoothie shake thingy
Yeah,
because
dude.
cherries are I would actually I mean, I like cherries, but I never realized how delicious they are in a smoothie. I just put serving or two of those and then just a hint of like cocoa powder in there.
Ooh,
And
yum.
like I think you talked about that
Yeah,
the other day with me. It's so tasty. And it's
yeah.
like I'm sure you noticed for all it's my little routine while we're recording. I have my little smoothie right here
Yep.
and the cherries, dude. We're almost out though, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do.
Yeah. They
There's
go
going to be nothing
fast.
else I can eat
Yeah.
after. Cherries are too good.
Yeah, I had a when I texted you so like 4 or 5 days ago, I had two of the Safeway, they're not the big bags, but they were on sale, so like they're the whatever $5 bags, and I had the mixed berries, I had the cherries, I had frozen strawberries and bananas. No, sorry, those are two different trips. Anyway, point being though is I got all this new stuff like 4 days ago. I'm like, oh, this will be good. 7 days, 7, 8 days, maybe even 9. Maybe we can even no, like four or
Yeah.
5 days.
Yep.
I have not been. I generally don't portion control to the. I don't. I'm very I portion control broad strokes, right? I kind of do
Hmm.
what we talk about in like precision, when we're talking about new nutrition clients, kind of using our hand sizes as different portion
Yeah.
control, right? I don't look at my hand anymore because I have an idea of what I need. But that said, when there's something like black cherries and I'm not being super meticulous about how much I'm putting in, it's like that. Oh, there goes half the bag.
Yep.
It's
Exactly.
delicious.
Dude, the only problem though with like if you get those mix bags,
Mm.
they're good, don't get me wrong, but one of the old ones we used to get, so there was pineapple, there was blueberry and strawberry.
Oh,
Sounds great, right?
yeah,
The issue
interesting.
is you get past that little top layer of the bag and it's literally just blueberries because I'm
Yeah.
assuming those are the cheapest, so they fill it up 90% with that and make it look all pretty on top with, the strawberries and the pineapple.
Yeah.
So it's always frustrating. They always seem to do that. But when you just get one thing like cherries or whatever, it's delicious. I do miss pineapple though. I think pineapples and shakes are really good. And I don't care
Hmm.
what everyone says. Pineapple on pizza is the way to go.
Oh, dude,
Even though everyone, yeah,
I'll
you're into that
fight
or what?
anybody who says pineapple and pizza doesn't belong in pizza. I will fight anybody who says pineapple doesn't belong in pizza. You know what doesn't belong in pizza? You.
Dude, okay, check this out. Pineapple, pepperoni, extra cheese.
Done.
Dude,
Done.
so good right there.
Done.
So good.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
the pineapple pepperoni combo definitely while it's not like highbrow by any means, it definitely has that kind of smack of like Qzar like being like
Wait,
12.
cues.
You
Oh
remember
yeah.
Qzar laser tag?
Yeah.
I guess for our listeners, Qzar is a regional laser tag company that when Jake and I were growing up was, I guess I don't know. I guess it was national. Maybe it was not. It was national.
I
It
have
just
no idea.
you don't remember? Okay, you
No, no,
had
no.
to have
I don't know.
played.
Like,
Oh, the
I
the
just knew there
Qzar.
was one in the Bay. I didn't know if they were all over the place. I had no idea.
Because I know I played with Andrew lots, and I'm sure you've played with Andrew lots. That means that we definitely played together probably a few times.
Probably, I'm
Because I
sure.
feel like that was like it would have been like Andrew's birthday party or some shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I do remember distinctly, Andrew always got top ace or top gun or whatever it was, and I was always so jealous of him. It goes back to
Dude,
the racquetball. Yeah,
racquetball.
we hate him. We
Yeah, I
hate
know,
you, Andrew.
dude. He's the worst, but I love him at the same
I
time. But
know.
I also hate him. So
I know you guys are gonna see as soon as Andrew comes on regularly. For those of you who are listening every time, he was here with us on our last podcast episode 84. But he is not mic'd yet, so we're doing a kind of a slow onboarding process as is appropriate because anytime you come on to something, it's you got to take a little time to get on. But once he has kind of done that process, you guys are gonna hear some real fun shenanigans between the three of us. That's for sure.
yeah, he's doing virtual ride-alongs right now with
Mm.
us to check it out. But yeah, it's gonna be fun once we get him mic'd up and everything. And it's
Mm.
gonna be a new experience for him. But I think he's gonna really like it after he's doing it for a little while.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I feel like it's a perfect opportunity, really, kind of for all of us because we have a very natural ebb and flow in our natural conversation and our natural friendships. And, as we've talked about before, you and I are definitely the talkers. And this was back in the day, throughout the years, you and I are the ones who are gonna, like, we're gonna talk, we're gonna chat, we're gonna, like, for me, I know, like, I'm a dog with a bone. So, like, when I find an issue, like, I'm used to everybody around me being like, all right, dude, like, you got it. Like, go ahead and do whatever you think. Sure. But, like,
Yeah.
then there's certain people in my life who were like, well, I don't know about that, and, like, would keep talking about it. And I remember you and I, like, everybody else, like, dead eyes. And then you and I would still be talking. And it was always some stupid. It wasn't ever,
Yeah.
stuff like this where we're talking fitness, like, that's super important, right? It was, whatever bullshit we were talking about. Movies came out or whatever. Not games, because you and I fight each other over games.
Dude,
A lot of
it's
fighting
funny you
today.
say that because over time, I feel I've gone a bit more introverted. Because I would
Interesting.
say, depending on the situation, growing up, I was pretty extroverted,
Yeah.
and then as I've gotten older, it's gone the other way, and I
Mm,
feel I'm more extroverted in certain circumstances. So
mm,
if I'm hanging out with a small group of old friends
mm,
that I've known for a long time, then I'm more extroverted. But if I'm in a group of people that's a little bit bigger and I don't necessarily know well, I've noticed myself not going out of my way to want to talk as much.
mm,
Like I don't feel like energized by it as much anymore, but I do feel energized when I have, small groups, close friends, or
mhm,
obviously conversations like this. Then I do like that. But it's so funny that I never would have thought that 10, 12 years ago that
mm.
I would call myself, you know, closer to the introvert side, or actually probably somewhere in the middle. It's kind of funny.
You know, I kind of feel like there's something about right around, your late 20s, your early 30s, where a lot of us, at least my experience in being listeners, I'm 32, so this is very much just a, current slash just past experience. Really had this idea that that I lost my train of thought already. Never mind. Must not have been important, so
About
forget about it.
introverted,
Oh,
extroverted
thank you.
thoughts. Yeah.
Around this age. Yeah. Sorry, guys. I'm a little more scatterbrained today than usual. So I feel like a lot of people right around age 30, like, real life kind of kicks in, and we all, a lot of us kind of get our ass beat a little bit, like life, like, you're in your 20s and you're like, oh, I'm gonna work. I'm gonna make it. We're gonna have a house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
like I'm gonna be able to eat. And then you get to 30 and you're like, oh, I'll pick one of those. I'll take one. You know what I mean? And, like, usually it's food, because none of us these days, not many of us these days, are talking about getting a house right now, right? So it's like that idea of, like, we're all out, we're having, life is great. And then you're like, oh, you get beat up. And then all of a sudden it's like, I feel like there is a natural kind of evening out for those of us who are more extroverted when we were younger. Cause I feel my own version of what you just said, which is basically like, I was out in the world. Yeah. It's like, we're good. And, like, everything's, we're going to make it, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? And then real life kicks in, you get your butt beat, and then it's like, okay, well, now what are we gonna do today? All right, and then it becomes real life, and it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well, I'm building something today, and then tomorrow I'm gonna build something again, and then the next day I'm gonna build a little bit
Yeah.
more on that, as opposed to before, where it was just like, I don't know. That I feel like, I know you're talking about being introverted or not, but that can absolutely have, like, a little bit of can make anybody a little more introverted once you've experienced the brutality of real life.
Yeah, seriously.
Right?
But the cool thing too, though, as life has gone on, I've realized too, it's okay to be both. If
Yeah.
or even on one side or the other is fine too. Because I used to think like, okay, if you're a real leader, you have to be extrovert. You have to do this or say this. And then in my head, like even say a career like a trainer,
Mm,
you wouldn't think someone introvert would be able to be successful at that. But that's not true either. It's not
totally.
necessarily these very specific traits, although of course I'm sure there's a few that are common among really good trainers. I think it's more of the point of, at least for a trainer, getting someone where they are to where they want to be. And just because you're super introverted or extrovert, I think you either way you could still do that. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just different, you know what I mean?
I would even argue it's a really good thing, because there's a lot of introverted people out there who are not going to come work with an extroverted trainer. There's a lot of introverted people who might choose and do choose often to work with somebody once they've found. Let me take a step back. Nobody really. We're all looking for like the right trainer for us. So sometimes we settle in with a trainer that's not quite right for us. Sometimes we settle in with a trainer we think's not quite right for us, and we ends up that they are the right trainer for us. There's a whole bunch of different things going on. But when you start talking about all the different people out there, and then you say, "Oh, but a trainer should be only this."
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like a trainer, and this is actually, I think, part of the problem that we've developed in this industry is uh, our consumers tend to think about trainers as this muscle bound kind of jock, drop down and give me 20. And certainly there's plenty of trainers that are like that, but there's a lot of trainers who aren't. And, as we talk about introverted trainers and success, I personally, one person in particular that I work with who I have a lot of admiration for and respect, who's a senior trainer to me, that I work with at the studio that I work at. She is very, very much the introverted person. And I see the clients and she's the owner of the business, and she's full time. So she's working all the time. Right. And all of her clients are completely different from all of my clients. Like they're just very different people.
Right.
Her people are much more, quiet's not the word, because like quiet can almost be insulting, but much more introverted is probably the right word, right? So
Right.
you never know.
And also, this is just my opinion, but one way I can tell if someone is a brand new trainer, one of the things that seems to be common is they think they have to be either a motivational coach or a boot camp instructor, or
Oh
like a
my
mix of
God.
the
Yep.
two. And yes, it's great if you can motivate your clients, but that's a very just surface level thing.
Yeah.
So when I see people just yelling, thinking they're a drill sergeant in boot camp, like to one-on-one it's funny to me. It's like I feel you see that more with someone that's brand new and it doesn't really get it yet. I mean, an experienced trainer more meets, like we've talked about, meets people where they're at, and then you decide what that person needs and you help them get there. And so normally that's not with an everyday person. Being a drill sergeant isn't gonna do that for at least for most people.
Absolutely. And I would argue that one of the most damaging things in our recent, last 20 years history as a culture, towards trainers, um, and the idea of what a trainer is and should be, was The Biggest Loser. Did you watch that back in the
Oh,
day?
dude.
So okay, I can
Oh
tell I can
my
tell I just
god.
hit a trigger for
I
Jake.
just you
So,
yeah, you just triggered me.
so so we'll like, it sounds like we'll have a whole little section here on Biggest Loser, but the context of what I'm implying, or not implying, I'm explicitly saying, is that America saw The Biggest Loser and they said, okay, it's possible to be obese and also get into shape. And that's great. That's awesome, because it absolutely is. And I don't want to turn anybody away. If you are obese and you want to and you want to change your body, there are a million ways you can do it really successfully. Not a million. There's a bunch of ways you can do it really successfully. The Biggest Loser model is, my opinion, the worst possible model. Well, no, I shouldn't say possible, because there can always be worse,
Dude,
right?
it's
But
just say it, man.
it's
It's
bad.
true.
It's bad. Well,
It's horrendous.
okay, so case in point, and I don't want to harp on one or the other, but Jillian Michaels over Bob, I forget what Bob's last name was, but Jillian Michaels had this very hard-edged trainer persona, right? And she's always in your face, she's screaming, yeah, yeah, and then she's, good job. It's exactly the type of trainer that Jake was just saying that new trainers often model themselves after. And I would argue, in large part, because of The Biggest Loser, or at least The Biggest Loser was a manifestation of this already existing um, culture, right? So, but here comes Biggest Loser. Here comes Jillian Michaels, who I'm sure is a great trainer in terms of like results, but the reality is what we see as a viewer is not psychology and information based teaching as much as it's old school, in your face, screaming in your face, get it done. And the value of that is not for the client. The value of that style is for the viewer. because the viewer
Yes.
watches this and is like,
100%.
exactly, right? So the viewer needs, as a viewer, we need like a simple narrative. It makes a lot of sense as a viewer to be like, okay, here's the trainer, here's the heavy person. Trainer plus heavy person equals fit person. And it's so much more complex and convoluted and nuanced than that. You know, it's here's a person, here's another person. If the person who's the professional is on top of their game, they're leading the other person through that without having to push them off the edge, right? You know, as a trainer, there's times to gently push somebody, but that's a whole different thing than what we're used to seeing and what Jake and I are talking about.
Dude, but pushing someone though can be great, but do that
Yep.
show,
Yeah.
it's so far past extreme. It's complete. It's just entertainment.
It's entertainment.
That's all.
Straight up. Yep.
Dude. It's insane. I mean, they make them do some type of physical activity. 8, 9, 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
They're on these super low calorie diets. And the things I've read, almost no one that has been on that show actually maintain
Yeah.
their weight loss. I've
Not
read that a
sustainable.
bunch. And I was really, proud to hear this too. So like Lane Norton, most people know him. He's probably the most regarded person in the nutrition space. He has his PhD in nutritional sciences. Anyways, it was really cool. They invited him to be on the show, and they were probably going to pay him a boatload of money. And he said no.
Yeah.
Like he's like, I'm not doing that. Like,
Yeah.
giving people these unsustainable and even crossing the line of unhealthy practices. He's like, I'm not doing
Way
that. So
crossed.
I just thought it was really cool because I have heard him say over time that he will never compromise his integrity in this space by doing something like that.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool to actually see someone follow through. Because I mean, who knows? Like he could have made hundreds of thousands of dollars for filming a handful of episodes or whatever. But yeah, that show, although it's entertaining, it's a terrible picture to give depending on the person watching, but say someone who has never exercised before, or someone that doesn't have, a background in fitness and they're severely overweight and they're watching that thinking that's what they have to do to get in shape. That's going to push so many people away thinking I have to exercise for 12 hours a day and eat 800 calories a day.
And then I'm not even going to keep the weight off.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So dang. Yeah, that's I haven't seen that show in a long time, but
yeah. Well, I think that there was a little bit of a divide I'd have to do a little more research, but I think I know that I forget his last name, but the other trainer, right? Biggest Loser was Jillian Michaels and Bob B. I forget his last name was a B something, but I can't remember. It was like Burnquist or something like that. But that's a skateboarder.
Bob Burnquist,
that's a skateboarder, huh? Okay, so not Bob Burnquist, but it's Bob. I can see his face so clearly in my mind. He had cardiac failure, or I shouldn't say he had some kind of cardiac event.
Congestive heart failure, maybe.
Yeah, it was like a heart attack. He had some kind of heart attack.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure if it was a heart attack specifically, but it was cardiovascular disease related. And
got it.
And he basically came out, so he recovered from it and everything, and he came and afterwards I saw him come out, and I only saw like 1 or 2 ads, so it was a short promotion period, but he came out and was promoting, I wish we had Andrew with us to fact check me, but I think he was promoting low intensity exercise or low to moderate intensity exercise for exactly like the reason where he's like, look, like even though like it felt to me like he was trying to backpedal some of the damage that they had done in Biggest Loser, especially considering that style of go is really could be. It's a whole issue. We'd have to have a doctor with us, but that is potentially really not good. High intensity work can be really good and really bad depending on how you address it with a client with heart problems. So, basically he comes out and he starts talking about this lower intensity, moderate exercise. And so I want to give him a little bit of credit based on that. But even then it's like how much damage, and it's not his fault. There's producers, there's network heads. He's just the face of it, right? They're just the face of it, but they have responsibility, certainly. And so it's curious. I'm going to be curious to see if we're going to ever see Jillian Michaels doing something like that, where she's kind of backstepping her whole thing. But, I doubt it, because this is also their bottom line, right? This is the money they make. So
Yep, that's what it's about. It's just bottom line. It's not necessarily about helping people.
Mm-hmm.
Which is unfortunate, but that parallels just about everything we talk about on the show
Yeah,
with the fitness industry. That's just kind of how it goes, unfortunately.
absolutely.
But speaking of fitness and speaking of the gym, I did see something a little bit more uplifting the other day that made me really happy when we were at the gym. And I saw this dad with his probably 6 or 7 year old daughter, and she was in there working out with him. And that was the
Cool.
coolest thing I've seen in a long time.
Love
Like they
it.
were on, I think they were doing tricep extensions or something, but I was watching this dad teach his little girl how to safely exercise. And I was like, man, I can't wait to do that one day. I wanted to go up to him and tell him, like, good for him, but I didn't know if he would think I was a weirdo for coming up and saying something. But dude, what a cool thing. Like, because I want to teach my girls that,
Yeah.
to be healthy and strong and not what was taught to just about every female in the 90s and 2000s, maybe even now a little bit,
Yeah.
about severely starving themselves and
Right.
doing 3 hours of cardio a day and whatever the crazy stuff that they were told. I want to teach my kids to be strong and healthy and not all the garbage we've seen the last couple decades. So really cool, a little different than the the Biggest Loser show, but it was cool to see. So
Dude, you just made me so grateful to my dad because that was what I got. What you just described about teaching your little kids, your young daughters how to exercise effectively. That's what he did for me. I think I was like 11-ish when he started teaching me how to lift properly. Um I might have even been earlier, but I remember thinking at the time like, okay, whatever. And then my experience since then has been since that time in my life, the importance of those skills has gradually and progressively increased to the point of necessity. And we've talked about this, listeners. I use exercise legitimately as medication. I actually, I don't know if I've said that explicitly before, but I I was able to choose exercise as a measure of I was able to choose exercise basically in place of pharmaceuticals as medicine. So let me be clear. Those pharmaceuticals are very important, and the fact that they're there for me when I need them is absolutely a really important part. But I use exercise as a day to day in my life to manage various symptoms, one of which you're hearing right now, which is disorganized thinking. So I didn't work out this morning. I deal with disorganized thinking every day, and right in this moment, I don't even remember where I was going with this. So hopefully,
we
so
we were we were talking about like starting, young with learning
right.
strength
Thank you.
training and everything.
I was just saying I was
Did
very grateful. Thanks, Pop, if
Oh,
you're
right,
listening.
right. Did,
Thanks for
did
bringing me
you go
back.
through a weird thing like so when you were new to lifting or the first time you say that your dad taught you? Did you think you were going to be way stronger than you actually were? Because I was thinking back to the first time that I ever had a gym membership. I was a teenager and I assumed, oh, I'm probably pretty strong or at least averagely strong.
Mhm.
And I went to 24-hour fitness by myself. And I went to the bench press, of course, because that's the
Of
only
course.
movement a teenage boy wants to do.
Right.
And I put 25s on both sides of the bar. I'm like, okay, 95 pounds. This is probably okay.
Oh
And
no.
so I remember lifting the weight up. It was just me. There was no spotter there or anything. I had worked out previously with, a buddy of mine, his older brother, who taught us how to lift,
Mm.
but everything was in the garage and he kind of guided us. But this was the first time I was on my own. So, anyways, I unracked the weight and it felt a lot heavier than I thought. And so
Mm-hmm.
I tried to do 10 reps, but I was probably going down 3 or 4 inches doing this,
Yeah.
like a lot of ego lifting teenagers like to do. And on the 10th rep, I couldn't get it up. It pinned
Oh
me, and this
no.
95 pounds is on my chest, and I'm looking around, and I was like, "Oh shoot!" So no joke. It started tipping like this.
Aw.
The 25 slid off the bar and
Aw.
fell down. Then the
Oh,
barbell
thank God.
tilted back the other way,
Whew.
but
You
this
got lucky.
this weight specifically rolled across the gym. So, oh my gosh, I was so embarrassed. But the good thing with both the weights kind of rolling away in opposite directions is there wasn't a lot of people at the gym. There was
That's
only a
good.
handful. I can't remember if I went like early or late in the evening or something, but there was barely anyone there. But I was so embarrassed because I'm like, oh, I'm probably pretty strong,
Yeah.
and I was not.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 95 pounds felt like about 315 pounds or whatever. So yeah, that was my experience when I
So
first started lifting.
So, listeners, especially any young listeners out there or inexperienced listeners out there, take the lesson of what Jake just said to heart. There's no need to have the bar unless you've got a spotter or unless you know how to lift that weight and you've done that before. Okay. That said, dude, you were so lucky. Holy shit. Can you imagine if that weight hadn't fallen off and you probably would have just sat there till somebody came
Yeah,
around, but still that would have been increasingly painful and dangerous, right?
yeah. The good thing it was like 95 is not a lot of weight. I weighed more
Yeah.
than that, so I probably or hopefully could have shimmied it off myself somehow.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny now. It's like the opposite. If I'm by myself at the gym, I think it's great to not have a spotter with movements like that
Hmm.
because well, I do have a lot of experience with it, but
That's
more
the key.
because
Yeah.
it prevents me from lifting too heavy. And what I
Yeah.
mean by too heavy, it's very easy still, to let the ego get in the way sometimes and just going heavy for the sake of going heavy and always having to add weight no matter what. It prevents me from doing that. Knowing I don't have a spotter, I'll tone it back a little bit. I'll still push
Hmm.
it, don't get me wrong. But to me, it keeps my ego in check sometimes when I don't have a spotter there doing that.
Totally.
So I'll do a little bit less weight, concentrate on good form and just moving the bar efficiently. So in a way it can't help, but that came with a little bit of experience though.
Yeah, and that's the key really, because you're gonna see. Let me be clear: if you're experienced with the barbell and you know how to manage the weight, you're fine. Especially if you're using a cage or some kind of system where there's a catch. You know what I mean? Um, that said, um, a good way to do this, listeners, if you are nervous about the barbell, but you want to do some chest press and you don't have a spotter, dumbbells are a great option for you. Just make sure that, just like we're talking about with making sure erring on the side of lightweight, do the same thing with the dumbbells as well. Because when you remove the bar and you start just doing with the dumbbells, now you have to enlist all of your little stabilizer muscles to keep the dumbbells in place. So keep that in mind. It goes along with the theme that we always talk about here, which is just do less weight. You could always increase the weight. You can't ever backtrack once you've overdone it. You know what I mean? Like, once you've overdone it, you've probably tweaked something. You can like rest, but you can't keep that tweak from happening once it's happened. So err on the side of lightweight and work your way up, especially if you're lifting on your own. And again, if you're inexperienced, make sure you're working with at least another person who has experience before you're using that barbell on your own for the reason Jake just said.
Yeah, the dumbbells, that's definitely a great idea, especially if you're by yourself, because worst case, it's very easy to bail. You can
Yep.
let go of the dumbbells. And dumbbells are actually, I think they're really fun. I
Mm-hmm.
don't normally do that, or right now I haven't been doing them as much, but I think it's a fantastic movement if you're doing any type of dumbbell press, really, and especially like you said, if there's no one there to spot you. I
Mm-hmm.
think dumbbells are great. Dude, I can't believe we haven't even brought up the Super Bowl yet.
Oh my God,
We made it
dude.
20 or 30 minutes or however long it's been
I've thought
into the
about it like
show.
3 or 4 times though
I
since we've been
know, and
talking.
we haven't even said anything. Oh my! Well, I want to ask you first what you thought of the game until I say anything. I want to hear what you thought.
All right. All right. Well, so this is like a nuanced conversation because anyone watching the game yesterday knows there's a lot to dissect. Uh, I'm gonna start on the most obvious and the thing that's being talked about the most, which is the face mask. The that
Um,
that yeah that
yeah.
face mask that caused um. So okay, wait. Let me take a step back. That actually didn't make the difference in the end, huh? That was
It
just because,
didn't,
yeah, that's so funny. I
but
didn't realize
I
it until just now.
thought it would. At
Yeah,
that moment, I thought that would be the deciding
totally.
factor.
Well, I spent the whole that's as I just you can tell I just processed. I spent that whole game thinking, oh, this is the moment that especially as close as it was, right? And then I just realized as I'm talking about it, no, it ultimately didn't because the Rams took it, but um oh, so interesting. So, oh my God, I didn't realize like I had more processing to do because those things are completely unrelated. Okay, sorry. Let me take a step back because I gave such a poor answer first. I want to hear what you have to say, and then give me a sec, because that's a whole different like
Yeah.
context now.
So I had a couple different issues. Here's the first one going into the game. I can't like the Bengals. I have to hate the Bengals because they knocked the Raiders out of the playoffs. So
Mhm.
I'm just gonna be like a poor sport about that. So I couldn't get on the train to have the Bengals win. But then there's the issue of the Rams. I'm not going to vote or root for an LA team.
Right.
So there's a huge issue. What I do when I hate both of the teams and I don't want either of them to win.
Right.
What happens at that point? So the whole time I'm like, man, I don't even know what I really want to happen here. I guess want a good game. But when it got to that point where there was that face mask call,
Mm.
which I thought would be the deciding factor of the game, it made me frustrated because when the Raiders got knocked out by the Bengals, it was I'm just going to be a poor sport again, partially because of a very terrible call with the
Mm.
ref. They blew the whistle. The play should have been dead. There shouldn't have been a touchdown.
Mm.
Anyways, I'm not bitter. Actually, I'm still a little bit bitter. But point being, I thought the game was going to be won by the Bengals,
Mm.
partly because they missed that face mask call.
Right.
And then I don't know if you remember, toward the beginning of the game, the Rams missed an extra point. So for a while, it looked
Mhm.
like those two silly little things were going to be the reason that the Bengals were going to win.
Right.
So that was my take on the game. I am happy that toward the end, it did get pretty exciting. It was close.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I thought the Bengals. It got to a point where I'm like, okay, I think the Bengals are going to come back and win. That's kind of how I started feeling.
Yeah.
But
they could
overall,
have. Very
yeah,
easily.
that's
could've.
true.
Donald shut that. I mean, the whole defense did, but Donald made sure that wasn't happening.
Oh yeah,
There's
dude.
plenty of time.
That dude was ripping people's heads off for sure. But yeah, I was surprised that they didn't get that 4th-and-1 conversion at the end of the game, and that was it. I'm like, dang, that's it, just right
Yeah.
there. There's nothing they can do at that point. So,
Yeah.
but I guess it's cool to see Aaron Donald, win a Super Bowl. I think
Yeah.
that was kind of the last thing that he needed to do. And I heard people talking about him possibly retiring, which I don't know if that's true whatsoever.
Yeah.
But he did get his ring, so that's great. The Bengals didn't win, so part of my heart is at peace because they knocked the Raiders out. So that's what I thought of the game.
Nice. I'm glad that were able to process that, because I was still focusing, like, in my brain, that was still a key moment, the face mask, but I didn't even really get through the whole process until now that wasn't even, because the Rams took it, that wasn't even the issue. So taking that off the table, really, for me, I mean, it actually kind of simplifies it, because obviously as a football fan, I want to see a great game, in which we got to see. But as a defensive player, it was a viscerally satisfying game, because they did such a good job. They did the offensive lines on both sides, but especially Cincinnati's offensive line did such a great job of handling Aaron Donald. Well, let me rephrase. The strategy did, because really Burrow just got rid of the ball hella quick, right? So I mean, so it's the whole.
And he got sacked a bunch too, but I mean, you're right. They did kind of hold him up a little bit in the beginning.
Yeah, well, I felt like it was the whole first half, pretty much. That I don't remember any Donald sacks, or I mean, there was a couple other players, and so let me say, there were sacks, but they were successful at neutralizing Donald for a long time, which is really the key, isn't?
I don't think he got. I think you're right. I don't think he got any sacks. So I'm trying to remember, but you're totally right.
Other defenders definitely did, and the whole defense played well, and it's easy to focus on Donald. But as a defensive player, it's not often that you like there's at any given time there's 4 or 5 really great offenses in the league. Any given time there's like 1 or 2 really great defenses in the league, and and when a player like Mac or Donald comes along and just disrupts everything, and all of a sudden you got to put 2 guys on them, obviously that opened it up for the other players to get the whatever sacks were happening. But however you look at it, the entire game plan is still focused on dealing with this one player, right? And then dealing with everything else that goes along with it. So they did a really good job of handling him at the beginning, and then there was a moment, I think it was in the third quarter sometime, where Donald got his first sack, and then the wall started crumbling, and it was like progressively more towards the end, and then it ended with those 2 decisive plays. For a defensive player, it doesn't get much sweeter than that. You know what I'm saying? To see a defensive player disrupting the entire game so dramatically. That's why, as we go through, listeners, you've heard me talk about Mac before. You'll hear me talk about Donald. These are some of my favorite players, like LT. I know he was an alignment, but it was the same thing, going way back, right? Lawrence Taylor, same thing. You have these guys who, like, you have to completely strategize around this one person, and that's obvious. When you're dealing with that with offense, that's one thing, because you're gonna have somebody who's really fast. You're gonna get the ball. There's all these aspects, but when you're talking about a defensive player that disrupts the game like that, it just lights me up. So the fact that obviously Cooper Kupp did an amazing job and deserved that MVP. I wanted to see Aaron Donald get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I'm biased,
Yeah.
so.
Normally, I think the MVPs for the Super Bowl go to like the quarterbacks most of the time. But that would have been cool to see Donald get it. But
I think defensive players have won it, but it's like once in like a while. I think it's
right.
like, and actually, let's look it up. What I want to see. Where Andrew?
I know. Where's Andrew at?
Oh, okay. Well, whatever. We'll look it up later, but because we probably talked been like 20 minutes of football already.
I know. We just get excited. We'll have to start a second podcast on just football. Yeah. But yeah, let's go back to, let's talk about fitness again. We'll go to our fitness focus section and go through some funny things that I heard in the industry this week. We could literally do a section every week on funny things that I've heard in the industry, but these were exceptional, and not a good way either, that I heard this week. And so I'm going to go over 4 funny things that I've heard, and this is from 2 people. So the first, I think it's 3 points here. It's from the same person, and then the last point's from someone else. Regardless, these are above and beyond. Silly would be a nice way to put it.
Yeah, I just read the first one. That was what the oh my god was.
Yep. So according to someone in the industry this week, they claimed we can live solely off of light.
Yeah, I've heard this one before too.
And by just getting light, we'll get all the nutrients that we need just from that.
Oh, the one I've heard is breathing. I've heard the one breathing gives you everything you need.
I think he went into that and connected both of those, like light and breathing or something. Sure. I don't even have a comment about that, so I'll just leave that for everyone to hear.
Yeah, I'll make a comment on it. We need other things besides light.
Yeah, there you go. That's obvious to most people. Yeah. But who knows? Maybe not this person. Yeah. Point number 2, muscle is crystallized blood and consciousness. Again, I don't know. I don't have a thought that I can articulate right now about that.
It's people. One, who are, this is the bigger one, you've talked about this, who are just trying to get social media clicks, and 2, it's going to be people who are just uneducated and think that they know something based on how they feel. I thought that I knew something based on how I felt, and I came and said it on the podcast, and I was wrong. I had to go fact correct it, because that's real life,
But you didn't say something off the wall,
right?
That's a whole different. Yeah, maybe it's for clicks. I don't know. A lot of the time, I tell myself it has to be for clicks because it's so insane,
right?
But I don't know. Maybe someone believes this.
It's dumb no matter what. I mean, and we're not even saying, maybe there is some perspective where muscle is crystallized blood and consciousness, not scientifically.
Yeah,
not scientifically.
Someone's head, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
In the next point, again made by the same person. Again, no words for me.
Oh my god.
He said muscles made up of snot.
Okay, this person's just uneven. Either they're going for clickbait, or they're not working with everything upstairs. I shouldn't say they're not working with everything upstairs. Could be a million conditions, whatever, but this is not information to build off of or learn, listeners.
Yeah. The last point was from someone else, and this is still, it's not as crazy as the points before, but I could see this getting more popular. People are starting to sell workout programs according to your blood type and telling you to work out a certain way. So I'll just leave it at this. If you see that, if someone's selling you a workout program based on your blood type, do not purchase that workout program unless you want to waste your money, which I know no one actually wants to do that. So yeah, funny things in the fitness industry. I'm sure in a couple weeks, we'll do the same thing. We'll
Yeah,
have a list of other crazy things we hear. But these were, at least 3 of these were completely new that I saw this week.
guys, if you are getting information from the internet, which we all are, you should be making sure that the people who are providing that information have the proper um, educational or experiential background. Because if they don't, they're going to say crazy things like this. Guaranteed, this person does not have the experiential or educational background. And if they do, then they definitely are either doing clickbait or trying, or like maybe not. They're struggling with maybe a mental health thing or something. But this is not information that should be out in the world.
Yeah, it's similar to, we talked about this on the show a couple weeks ago when that person that said eating fruit is like the same thing
Yeah,
as poison.
right.
So that's a dentist who's been trying to give out a lot of nutritional information,
Mm.
and he said more crazy things the last like week or two, and plenty of people are calling him out on it, but he keeps posting it because I think he knows it upsets people,
Yeah.
and it sends thousands of people to his comment section.
Yep.
And the more you comment on a post, the more engagement on a post, the more Instagram or whatever social media feed it is going to show new accounts. So part of me isn't sure if he actually thinks the things he says or if he just knows it's going to get him tons of attention. I mean, this dentist has a massive following. So I don't know. Maybe it's the just a way he gets more followers or something. So
Sounds like it.
yeah. So moving on to not silly things in the fitness industry. So we're going to go over optimal ways to gain flexibility. Now, most of us are used to the traditional, say, static stretching. That's where you sit there and you hold a movement for a while. So the reason I like this, I'm a little bit biased, but the data is clear on this, which is great too. I'm not some like I don't enjoy any type of stretching. I do it,
Right.
but I don't actually enjoy it. So when there's been data the last couple of years to show that you don't need to do static stretching to get more flexible and improve your range of motion. You still can if you enjoy it, but you don't need to. Now let me give you an example. If you're someone that might not enjoy doing tons of static stretching and you want to find other ways to be able to improve your flexibility and overall range of motion, here's an example. This is what I like to do sometimes. You don't have to do it this way, but this is what I do. So like I said, I hate static stretching or doing any long bouts of stretching. I just don't like it. So before I do my resistance training, I try to start with, a little walk, a little bit of cardio to get my heart rate up just a little bit and get all my joints nice and lubricated and get my blood flowing and all that good stuff and ready for movement. Then from there, go into normally a dynamic warm up. So this means I'm going through the full range of motion before I actually do my resistance training, going through all these movements, but I'm not actually holding them as you would in a static stretch. And, people normally will sit there for anywhere from 30 seconds to a couple minutes just holding a stretch. So I try not to do that if I don't have to. Now, so we move on to our resistance training. We're going to use the Romanian deadlift as an example again. So, what you can do to help improve your flexibility. So, as you go through the movement, our goal, especially if you do struggle with flexibility and mobility and overall range of motion, is to challenge that range of motion. So, if you can picture doing a Romanian deadlift, at the bottom of the movement, as the bar is getting closer toward your feet, the goal would be to go down a little bit farther. Now, it's going to feel like you're stretching your hamstrings, especially if you're not very flexible, the farther you try to go down. So, as long as you control that movement and you're stable and you're owning it the entire time, challenge yourself. Every set, as your muscles get a bit more warm, try to go a little bit farther. And the cool thing, too, with especially your nervous system, it's basically telling your nervous system it's okay. You can go down a little bit farther. A lot of it has to do with not your muscle actually stretching, but your nervous system.
Yep.
So when you go through these movements, challenge your range of motion a little bit each time. Go down a little bit farther. Now, not just for the sake of going all the way down to go all the way down, having terrible form, but challenge yourself a little bit with the movement. Now, I will say for myself personally, when I do something like a back squat, I am going to do a little bit of static stretching beforehand, really short bouts of it, just because I struggle to get into optimal positions for my back squat. So there's a little bit of static stretching there. But if I don't have to static stretch, I always feel better during my movements. If we start adding lots of static stretching, it can reduce strength and overall power output for your movements. So if you want to optimally gain flexibility and you don't want a static stretch, then challenging your range of motion during your actual movements is going to help significantly. And this has also been shown through studies and through data that it is as beneficial or optimal as static stretching for flexibility.
So great point that Jake just left off on. I'm going to springboard off of that and say that not only is it a great way to improve your flexibility, but from a functional and practical standpoint, it doesn't get much more effective. The reason why I say that is because when we're practicing dynamic stretching, excuse me, amongst the resistance work that we're doing, we are, in fact, engaging our core, especially if we're doing what Jake said, bringing our body through its full range of motion. And because we're holding weight, it naturally, just by holding it, we naturally create tension and stress that creates a stretch. So Jake was using Romanian deadlifts. So I'm going to switch to bicep curls. If you're doing your bicep curls, you're going to get that stretch during the eccentric phase. Okay. So the concentric phase is when the bicep curl, when you're coming up. Eccentric phase is when you're coming down. When you're coming down, the muscle is elongated. When you bring it through that full range of motion, you get that stretch, and it's a functional stretch that aids in the movement and the comfortability surrounding that movement. So when we compare static stretching to dynamic stretching, even forgetting about the fact that, the data obviously supports dynamic stretching, or active stretching, excuse me, we see that basically there's no point in doing the less functional thing when you have a more functional behavior or more functional movement. So when we talk about stretching and going through that full range of motion, what good in a practical standpoint does static stretching gain you over this dynamic stretching, mid-movement stretching? And there is an answer to that, and the answer is for corrective action. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're about, sorry, I don't mean to jump ahead of us, but we are about to address the times when we should be using static stretching. But for most of us, there's not a need to do that static stretching because that dynamic stretching while we're doing the activity is more effective. So, why are we going to throw an extra thing on that's less effective than the movement that we already did? Here's the key. If you're throwing the weight around and you're not doing this really conscientious, intentional movement, then all of a sudden static stretching becomes more appropriate, because if you're not getting that stretch when you're doing your resistance work, then you actually need to make sure you're doing some stretching afterwards. Otherwise, for most of us, there's not really a good reason to do that if we're not doing corrective exercise or corrective stretches, or if we're not doing, and if we are doing active stretching while we're doing our workout.
And so that will move us right into our Q&A and focusing on the topic of mobility and flexibility and stretching and all of that great stuff. The Q&A for the day, the question is, should I static stretch? Now, I know we were just talking about how just actually going through a full range of motion during your strength training movements can be optimal if you want to do that not static stretch, but should you do it at all? Now, the first part of the answer is it completely depends. Now, I'm going to use myself as an example again. There's certain movements that I struggle to get in an optimal position, like the squat. My ankles are so tight, my hips are tight, and me static stretching beforehand is going to help, quote unquote, loosen me up a little bit to be able to get into an optimal position during my movement. The key here, though, if you do static stretch before you strength train, try not to hold the movement super long. We start having a loss of strength and production of power after somewhere around the 45-second ballpark of static stretching. So if you're going to do it only if you have to, and do it with shorter durations of your static stretching. So if you can do it less than 45 seconds or so, that's going to be optimal for you. And I'm also going to say too, something that I notice, some people stretch just to stretch when they don't need
Yeah.
to. And where it becomes an issue is the people that are hyper flexible. And I've actually seen this a lot. So people are already extremely flexible to the point where they're going through their movements and they don't even look stable around their joints. And at that point, that person doesn't need to be static stretching before they resistance train. I think it's still great to get warmed up, maybe do a bit of dynamic stretching, maybe some very low intensity cardiovascular work beforehand, but that person isn't going to benefit during their strength training, that very hyper flexible person, if they do long bouts of static stretching. So that's when I would say you shouldn't do it. If you're someone like me that gets pretty tight around your joints, then a little bit of static stretching
Yep.
can definitely go a long way during your movements.
Perfect. That Jake just transitioned me perfectly, because the answer to this is, if for me, you should static stretch if you have muscular imbalance that you want to correct. So that might be strength imbalance, but more likely it's flexibility imbalance, because we're talking about stretching, right? But there's still value if you're talking about strength. But let's focus on flexibility, since that's what we're talking about here today. Oh, well, I mean, I'm sorry, you touched on flexibility, Jake, or strength, but I'm going to focus on. So when we're talking about static stretching after working out in particular, so that's, I won't ever have a client, personally, I won't have a client do any static stretching before, unless they've got something wonky that they need to stretch out or work out. You know what I mean? If they've got, tight hamstrings or something, I might have them go through a couple body weight deadlifts so that they can just bring themselves through that full range of motion, right? Or I might, to be more on point what we're talking about, I might have them do an umpire stretch, which is a standing hamstring stretch for those of you who are unfamiliar. The idea being here that if you know that you've got super tight hamstrings, a static hamstring stretch is a great option for you, because you already know that you have that imbalance. So we're using this static stretching as corrective action. The idea here is not to push that particular flexibility as much as it is to get the flexibility of your hamstrings to a more equitable place with the other muscles, so that when they're pulling and working in tandem, one's not going to pull, the stronger one's not going to pull the weaker one out of balance, right? So that's what most of us are dealing with. Even Jake said it. Yeah, I have got my own imbalances. Jake's talking about his ankles being a little tight. I've got traditionally very tight hamstrings, which is why I'm kind of focusing on them right now. But here's where the static stretching enters, right? It's like, I know I've got traditionally tight hamstrings, so I do a little more static stretching in my hamstring. To be honest with you, the only static stretching, well, I do 5 things for myself to keep my muscles in balance. That's I like to do a hamstring stretch, I like to do a quad stretch, I like to do a piriformis stretch, I like to do a hang stretch with my palms facing forward and my palms facing backwards. None of these things are done because I'm trying to dramatically increase my flexibility, as much as I use them to ensure that none of my muscles start to get tighter as I go through my workouts. So I know it's a kind of a nuanced answer, but it's a nuanced topic, right? Because stretching, while by no means are Jake and I saying you shouldn't stretch, we're simply saying that when you're exercising effectively, when you're doing resistance work effectively, your need for static stretching diminishes. That doesn't mean that you can't still use it to your advantage. It just also means that you want to use these guidelines to also not use it to your disadvantage, such as if you are going to If you're doing powerlifting, you're not going to, stretch for more than 45 seconds before that, or you probably won't stretch at all before doing that power lift. But the idea being is knowing when and where to use these skills.
And the one thing I did want to add as we wrap up today, a lot of people, when they feel a muscle is very tight and like it needs to be stretched, and a lot of times I see this with people's hip flexors and then hamstrings as well. You see this a lot. The tight feeling doesn't always necessarily mean you need to stretch them more. A lot of times this
Totally.
could actually be a strength issue.
Yeah.
So going
point.
through that movement, such as the RDL, like we talked about earlier today, going through that movement and getting your muscles stronger can actually start to solve that tight feeling. So when we have a tight muscle and we just stretch it and stretch it and stretch it, sometimes you're not even correcting what is actually the issue.
Totally.
So everyone's a little bit different. Just something to keep in mind. If you do have tight hamstrings, if you do have tight hip flexors, it might be more of a strength type of imbalance versus them just not being flexible enough. So just something to keep in mind.
Excellent point. I'm so happy you said that, Jake. What this really comes down to at this particular moment that Jake and I are at right now is this is where it really comes in handy to work with somebody, work with somebody who can help you identify the problems as opposed to, especially if you're somebody who's applying the skills and they don't seem like they're working the way that we're talking about them. There's probably something like this that Jay's talking about where, you might go into something like where you're like, okay, my hamstrings are really tight, but maybe it's really my quads or my hip flexors are so tight that they're making my hamstrings feel tight. I don't know if that chain works, but the idea being was what Jake just said. Oftentimes it's not the thing that we tend to think instinctually. A lot of times, especially in this work, the corrective behavior, the corrective movement is a lot of times counterintuitive to what your brain thinks when you do it, which is why a trainer is helpful, because if you do the thing that your brain thinks that it should do as opposed to the thing that's counterintuitive and actually better for it, we often exacerbate the existing issues to the point of injury. And now we're talking about taking a break, and then what happens is people injure themselves, take a break, and then go back and keep working out the same way, and they just get into this cycle of injury. So as you can, not saying just go out and find a trainer just to work with a trainer, but a good trainer is going to help you through these moments.
Absolutely. And all right, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to the Mission Driven Made podcast today. If you haven't subscribed to the show, please do so. Scroll down on your phone there and leave us a review if you did enjoy our content today. You can find us on Instagram at Mission Driven Made. Also, we created a free online fitness platform called The Forum. So if you went to Facebook and typed in Mission Driven Made The Forum, you can find us there. I'm also going to put a link in the show notes for The Forum. And it's a place where you can go to converse with other listeners of the podcast. And it's also a place you can go to ask Clayton or I questions. This can be anything from fitness, nutrition, mindset, lifestyle, whatever it is. We're there to answer your questions. And like I said, it's completely free. All right, everyone, we hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, stay mission driven.
Dance party. You live here. You live right here. All right, Twitch viewers, now is the time. I know the masses are all out there trying to bat down our doors. There's not. But if you are out there and you are curious, there's a lot of collective knowledge here. Tap it. Jake and I are here 3 days a week. We will get on a regular schedule eventually, so you'll know when we'll be here. But we will be here 3 days a week, so make sure come join us. Hit that follow button. Make sure that you get the alerts for when we're coming live. And yeah, thanks for hanging out. We'll see you guys on tomorrow. Tomorrow's a day, right? Right,
Recording
on.
Stopped.
All right. Recording stopped. I guess. Wait, hold on one sec. Oh, I messed it up, and then we're gonna do the song one more time. Because why not, right? I don't know.
Perfect.
I got the end screen up this time, so. Bass drop.